All right, Robbie, you wanted to talk about Canada changing their national anthem. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Shenanigans.
So, you know that NBA All Star game back in February in Salt Lake City, Utah? Well, Canadian singer Julie Black stirred things up by singing Our Home on Native Land instead of the usual Our Home and Native Land during the national anthem. And guess what? It caught fire. Mississauga's mayor, Bonnie Crombie, jumped on board with the idea too, showing huge support for this change. So now a recent survey looked into what people think about this lyric swap, and it turns out that 55% of English speaking only Canadians aged 18 to 35 support changing the lyrics. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting. People aged 35 to 54, that support drops to 42%, and for folks aged 55 and above, only 28% are
So
on
old
board
people
with the
don't like it.
change. Well,
Yeah,
that
makes
seems
sense.
and English only speaking. So, my question
Mm.
to you is, should the lyrics of O Canada be changed to Our Home on Native Land to reflect better Indigenous history and culture of Canada, or should the original lyrics remain unchanged to preserve the country's traditional anthem? First part. Second part, what do you think this change would represent for Canada's identity and its ongoing efforts towards reconciliation with Indigenous communities?
I feel you're not going to
Okay.
like what I say.
That dude.
Uh-oh.
Then it will be the theme of the evening.
That's funny. All right,
The
so
right
I,
answer.
I I see where the idea of changing the lyrics comes from, especially when we talk about reconciliation efforts with indigenous communities. Noble cause, no doubt about it. I actually personally love the idea of it. I think it's a slippery slope because today is the anthem, tomorrow it's something else. Where does these changes
Mm.
stop? Are we going to rewrite history, rewrite songs every time some new social justice issue comes to the forefront? Right? It's like we're catering to the soup du jour of social issues without really thinking it through. And honestly, I mean, when you think about it, the type of change that we're talking about, this single change to a word doesn't really do much to change what needs to happen. It's not really tangible improvements in the lives of these indigenous communities. So, are we just putting a band-aid on it by just saying, okay, we're going to change this one word? Sure, great.
That's a good point.
It's
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
symbolic, sure, and symbols can have life. I get that. So
Yeah.
but I'm more for kind of honoring indigenous history and cultures of people in general, people of Canada. Um, and I think there's other ways that we can do that. I think using changing this word or changing it just feels like we're constantly changing for whoever speaks the loudest gets the
Okay.
change. So,
Hmm.
what if the right starts speaking loudly, right? And starts talking about, no, we need to start talking, I don't know, I can't think of anything. But what if they start deciding, hey, we want to change it to this is our land, this is white people's land? I mean, all I'm saying is I think it kind of leads us down a road. It's a good song. I don't think the song is negative towards native people.
Mhm.
And it's so we're
Yeah.
not changing something from a negative to a positive. It's just, I don't know. I'm just,
Yeah, I wanted to give you a chance to get your stuff out, but you have to keep in mind that this is not a new social justice issue.
sure.
That Europeans settled North America on a legacy of genocide. But to
Absolutely.
be completely honest, genocide and displacement. So I absolutely support your points that it's symbolic and this really doesn't do much as far as reparation. But I think that the change is significant because technically, with the treaties that have been signed, we are guests on their land. We have certain we reserve mineral rights, but those rights were granted by the original treaties. It's been a long time, but I think that it's an important way to mark them. But Johnny, I really want to hear what you've got to say on this also.
Sorry about that, guys.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you fine.
Okay, because I was having a weird Wi-Fi issue. But no, yeah,
Oh,
I want to chime in on this because so a part of me feels like we should leave it alone, keep the same anthem. And the reason I say that is because a little similar to Neo's point, um, what's the purpose? Like, I mean, representation, sure, but what's the bigger, what are we doing? How are we progressing, moving forward by this smaller change? Then I start to think about how important it is representation, how important small words are and small seeds are in the bigger scheme of things. So I do think it's okay to say yes to this, but also still feel passionate about let's actually put some practical something else, like something that actually helps Native people, something that actually, like Rob said, you said that not everybody still has clean water as far as the indigenous towns. So that's something that should be more important as opposed to this. Rob, I mean, Neo, you're muted.
yeah, you're muted, Neo.
I'm
So
saying, I'm saying, is this gonna this change of the word, is that gonna suddenly give them clean water? Is that gonna
No,
suddenly
absolutely
improve
not.
their
And
situation?
that's it.
Is it gonna
what
improve
I'm
it long
saying.
term? Even if we were to think long term, is this
No,
change gonna
Neo,
actually
it's not
affect
going to
change?
improve any
It's
of
probably just
those.
to recognize.
But exactly, it's recognition. It's
But what does
reflecting
it
on
do? What does that do?
what it does. It just that subtle change forces us as Canadians, forces us to reflect on our Indigenous history and culture in this country. Um, we have a reconciliation act. There's a plan with the feds and our Indigenous populations to try to rectify things. It it brings reconciliation and inclusivity to our national anthem. It's also an educational opportunity for people to learn. When you hear our home on native land, well, what does that mean? So it gives you an opportunity to talk to people, which is wonderful. And it modernizes the anthem so that it is more culturally relevant because things in Canada have changed. The dialogue has changed considerably over the last few years with the residential school grave sites that have been found and just really turning an inner lens on ourselves and recognizing things. So we absolutely have an obligation to recognize them in every facet of our culture. And you're both right. We need to implement plans and policies that are going to actually help the communities. But I think the small symbolic change is important. And, preserving tradition, the symbolic meaning of the original anthem, whatever. Okay, it makes me feel good and change is icky. Well, okay, well, good.
But
Then
some
I'm
people,
glad that.
though, Rob, sorry, I just wanted to chime in for some of your fellow Canadians that were born and raised there. Because I read some, like, I know Reddit is not everybody's favorite forum, but Reddit had some interesting comments in regard to this topic. So some people who were born and raised in Canada,
Our native.
that are not from indigenous descent, that are,
Mhm.
I don't know, are they French Canadian? I don't know. But
We're
they
all of us.
Okay, so they felt
Well,
this.
I mean,
They felt like that's
yeah.
their land. Like, they're like, this is our land too. Like all I know is
Yeah.
Canada. So it is
But
kind of
my
weird
home
for us
from
to.
European settlers is native land. It is indigenous land.
Yeah,
And recognizing that doesn't diminish anything about my Canadian identity, doesn't take anything away from me at all, but it gives
Okay.
representation to a population sector that needs it, that it's been taken away from them. I think this is just it's
Okay.
a simple step to move towards reconciliation.
I
Or
just
it's a
Okay.
smaller step towards reconciliation. I know it's a small thing, but it changes
The
the song.
tone, kind
It's
of.
yeah.
I just feel like we get so caught up in changing. I've even felt like we've been whitewashing history a lot with taking down these Confederate monuments. Some of them need to go.
See, and this is the opposite of whitewashing history. This is forcing you to look at your history. It's the
Fair,
opposite, Neo.
fair.
It's the
True.
opposite.
That's a
Quite
fair point.
literally, it is.
I just feel like the change. I think that you can have you can symbolically do the new lyrics, whenever you like. If you're in a situation and you feel you want to do the new lyrics, fine. I don't think you have to have a national change to the song. Now, if it were a negative thing, like in our Star Spangled Banner, where we talk about, what do we have?
Ooh.
We talk
Our
about,
bombs bursting in air.
well, no refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or gloom of the grave. Now, if we needed to change that from the Star
I
Spangled
remember
Banner,
that
exactly, because that's actually, it's
Wow.
the fourth
Original?
verse. It's the fourth verse in the original in the full Star Spangled. It's not even the original. It's still the full Star Spangled Banner. It's not like they
Oh
changed
my
the song.
goodness.
Um, so if
It's
we were talking
modified.
about changing something like that, that's a negative to a positive, sure. But I don't know. I get the symbolism. I get the value of it, and symbols are important, and it could lead to
Yeah.
something long term, at least, you know, thinking, forward thinking. But I don't know. I'm not a fan of changing things every time I wasn't a fan of changing the name of the Commanders football team. I won't say the name
Leo
because
doesn't like
now all of us
change.
now it's a
Yeah, don't say it, man.
I'm
Don't
not
say
gonna
it.
say. I'm not gonna say it.
Don't
I'm not
say
gonna
it.
say it. It's
Oh
a
my
slur. It's an
goodness.
official slur. So I'm not gonna say it. But anyway, it is
Thank
what it
you.
is. It is what it is. But yeah, let me see if there's some comments online. Let me get to that. You see any comments online, Robbie? I see. As Jose
I do
says,
not.
indigenous population has been silenced for way too long. They didn't speak up about this. They didn't demand this. We owe the indigenous people. That's from Jose. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I love Joe's passion.
Yeah. Yeah,
She's
Joe.
a good person.
All right. So, is this truth, lies, shenanigans?
Well, bam.
Truth.
Truth.
Robbie
Truth.
bringing us the truth. Yeah,
Yeah, Rob.
I see the
Honestly.
value in it, but I also see it as a slippery slope of just changing
I can
things.
see your point to it. I can see your point to it, Neo. But I feel like when it comes to indigenous and black people, anything that they're trying to do to make things better, I'm for it. Even though it's probably like crumbs
If it
compared to
just
what
changes
is
your
deserved.
perception about our history with that one word change, if
I
it
mean, 'cause-
changes your perception of history and it changes how you view a population,
Yeah.
and that has a significant impact.
Because Native Americans were basically wiped out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.